Okay, good evening everyone. Welcome to Dhammaloka. My name's Bill Prince. I'm the events coordinator and I've got a couple of announcements. Tomorrow on Saturday the 17th, the Be Quiet group, 18 to 35-year-olds, will be going on a hike in Serpentine at 8:30 a.m. and afterwards they'll be attending Dana and Bodhinyana Monastery. Details are on the BSWA website, bswa.org. Please register via Eventbrite. Early Buddhism workshop, a series by Ajahn Brahmali and Venerable Sunyo on right samadhi on Saturday the 26th of November, 3rd and 10th of December. Registration will be open end of October. Our new Buddhist Q&A sessions with Gita commences here tomorrow from 2 till 3, followed by meditation. Crystal Hermitage End of Range Retreat ceremony will be held here at Dhammaloka on Sunday the 2nd of October from 10:30 a.m. onwards. All are welcome. Bookings are open for the Be Quiet group, Being a Friend to Yourself Youth Retreat with Ajahn Santuti on Friday the 2nd till Sunday the 4th of December at Jhana Grove. Email bequiet@bswa.org for bookings and enquiries. Ajahn Brahm will be travelling to Albany, Denmark and Walpole from 30th of September to the 3rd of October, giving Tama talks at each location. See our website for details. And I'm still looking for a volunteer gardening coordinator. If you're interested, please see me afterwards or email events@bswa.org. The Dhammaloka Building Fund is now an option for tax-deductible donations to support the BSWA. And tonight's speaker is Dennis Sheppard. Dennis is well known to most of you. He's been a president more than once. And he'll be talking tonight. It's called Beauty and the Beast. Beauty of life, death and dying, unifying the present moment. Over to you, Dennis.
That's better now, I think, isn't it? Thank you, Bill. Bill's a wonderful volunteer here. He's been here for so long, and I notice you're still looking for a gardening coordinator, Bill. So I hope someone... Nearly as long, yes. It's a very interesting and good job, actually, the gardening coordinator. So if there is anybody that's interested in doing that, because we really do look to try and make the gardens and all that happens here as good as we can, and sort of sustainable and all of that. So if you are interested in doing that for us here, I know that Bill would be very, very grateful. So, as Bill said, my name's Dennis Sheppard. I have been around the centre for quite a long time, really. And tonight, I'll follow the usual format of doing a half an hour of meditation or so at the beginning. But I did just want to start with a few words by just saying that I'll start off the talk at the end of it just by really coming back again to the four foundations of mindfulness. And I wanted to just mention that at the start here because if it's at all possible, I would like to kind of incorporate that into the meditation that we do for a start. And I'll guide you with it a little bit and hopefully just show you really the power that is there when we kind of look at these four foundations of mindfulness that the Buddha really did recommend so very highly. He actually talked about the 4 foundations of mindfulness, mainly in regard to the practice of meditation we do, which is the Anapanasati meditation, or the mindfulness of breath. And it's a very important thing. I'll talk a little bit more about it when we finish the meditation, just to just show you how I kind of see this as being so important, because the 4 foundations of mindfulness are, first of all, mindfulness of body, and then mindfulness of feelings, and then mindfulness of mind. So being mindful of actually to have the feeling of the mind inside you, and the mindfulness of the phenomena of mind. So the constructions and the creations that we build to fill up our mind. So those 4 foundations of mindfulness are very important, and what's so important, I think, that I kind of would just like to relate to tonight is just really this idea of feelings in your body, because when the Buddha talked about this, he talked about, well, even in his own practice, he said that everything that I have seen and understood, I have seen from inside this fathom-long length of body. So he didn't go outside, he didn't go out into the universe or anywhere else to try and find the truth of what was happening. He was looking inside his own body and using the feelings that are there in his own body. But more to the point, for the meditation that we're going to be doing, is that he recommended the Anapanasati meditation, the mindfulness of breath, as being very important to know what that feels like. Because really, when he started to talk about this, he was really going through a lot of the teachings that he gave as they relate to the feelings that are in your body. The feelings, and he was saying that the feeling of your body can be really well known with the breath. In fact, I've heard it, so I have to really check with Ajahn Brahmali on this, whether or not it's actually listed in the suttas, but I have heard from many people and monks that the Buddha really became enlightened doing Anapanasati meditation. So it's a very powerful form of meditation, but it is imbued with these 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 4 Satipatthanas. So understanding that feeling and just feeling what it's like as the breath fills your body and then expels from your body and then refills from the body, just feeling all of that is really bringing you into this sense of feeling inside the body. So, having said that, we'll start with a little bit of meditation and really just run through the body, and we'll certainly get to the Anapanasati. I think everybody here would be well aware of how to do that, but just for those that might not know, the main thing when we do get to mindfulness of the breath is just to know where the breath is, just to know whether it's going in, whether it's going out. You can know whether it's a strong breath or whether it's a slight breath. It goes in and it goes out. Just really investigating as much as you can, and being mindful of what's happening with your breath. So that's the basics of Anapanasati, but we will, I'll give you a little bit more of an idea of we'll just make a little bit of a sweep of the body to start off with, and then settle into the Anapanasati. But you'll find that the Anapanasati takes you to some wonderful places. It can take you into the rapture and even bliss, contentment. You finally get to contentment. We'll maybe see what we can see with that anyway. So usually best way is right hand on the left, your thumbs touching if you can. I like to do that because there's some really nice feelings too that you can get from the tips of your fingers. Sort of can help as a catalyst to bring relaxation into your body. So head pointing to the top of the ceiling and your back nice and straight. Not moving too much. And then closing your eyes, closing your mouth, and just breathing through the nose. And after you've taken a couple of breaths, you can just move your attention down to your toes. Let's pick a toe. Let's concentrate on the fourth toe, just to be a little bit different. Can you notice a feeling in your fourth toe? Maybe that's if you're wearing socks or if you've got your feet on the carpet, maybe you can feel that too to help. Just put your attention inside that fourth toe. And then let your attention run over the arch of your foot. You can usually feel that or sense what that is like, running over the arch of your foot, into the heels, up into the ankles, and just feeling that articulated nature of the ankles as it connects to your leg. Then moving up through the lower leg, through the shins, the calves, the back. Moving up through the knees, again just with the way that they bend. If there's any tension there anywhere, just to let that tension relax. And then letting your attention come up into your thighs. Just getting a sense of those big muscles that are there in your thighs, strength, the strong nature of them. And then moving your attention through your bottom, where you can usually just feel the pressure on your seat. Then moving the attention back up through the lower back for a start, just feeling that nice little curve in your spine and just getting the energy nicely balanced into your back. And then around the tummy. Just letting that relax. And up into the chest and upper back. Around the shoulder blades, and just becoming aware of all those rhythms that are there in your chest. And just feel the way that your arms too now hanging beside your body, bent at the elbows, moving into your forearms and wrists and hands. And then into the fingers. And this is where sometimes you'll notice that little bit of tingling that's there. I always find that quite nice to work with, that tingling, because often you can take like a snapshot of it and just take the whole section and maybe put it on your shoulder or put it on your leg. And you'll notice that that tingling is really there all of the time in your body, around the skin. This is an energetic flow that's right there around the shape of your body. But definitely around the tips of your fingers, and even as we move up through the neck and into the head area, behind the eyes and around the lips especially too, there's usually a little bit of this tingling, or on the top of your head. So just feeling into the body, relaxing. And then just see the body sitting just sitting on its seat. And there's a couple of things that you can just notice even about that, just the way that we're sitting on the earth or sitting on the floor that's connected to the earth. And just before we move on, we can reflect that we're in an earth-bound body. Our body is made from the earth, and we eat up all the plants and the vegetables and all the protein that we get from the earth. So we are connected there, but we're also connected into the space and the universe itself. Connected into this solar system. And then the wider galaxy. And then out into the entire universe. It's all right there. In fact, as I've often liked to reflect myself, we are in fact children of the stars. All of the elements in our bodies come from the stars. So just noticing yourself sitting, connected. Feeling this wonderful truth of the connection we have to the earth and to the universe. And then when you're ready, just starting to bring your attention just to your breath. Just feeling the flow. I usually like to position myself around the tip of my nose, but it doesn't really matter as long as you're aware of the breath. As it's flowing in and it's flowing out. And we're just going to practice to stay concentrated on the breath. So if you notice that the mind has moved, just bring the attention back. And just noticing the feeling of your breath. So the first two Satipathanas are just right there. Mindfulness of the body and mindfulness of feelings. And it's always very nice too to leaven those feelings just with gratitude. Gratitude for your body. The way that it's kept you alive since you were born. In my case now, going on for 74 years. Heart beating. And that brings up a sense of joy, a sense of gratitude for your body. Then we can always try to gladden the mind, to feel very glad for our situation, happy that we've got this awareness, this ability to live our lives with this body. We're just being with this beautiful breath. we can notice, just as we're staying with the breath, that the body is starting to settle, become still and tranquil. And you can notice just that feeling of happiness, of joy. That just goes with the contentment that starts to build as we settle and absorb into the breath. We absorb into the meditation. You might notice that your breath is starting to become a little bit more subtle. But hopefully you're noticing that the mind isn't moving around so much. It's not moving out to find desires. And it's not moving around to try and be averse to things. So you start to get the idea of what contentment is, just what it's like to be contented. And that contentment is always associated just with the stillness that's starting to build, the stillness of mind. Because that stillness is really a little bit like a background to the mind. And in fact it is the mind. The still matrix that's there. This is really the third foundation of mindfulness. The third satipatthana, mindfulness of mind, mindfulness of the stillness. What does that feel like for you? Now, as we're coming towards the end of the meditation, I'm going to ring the bell, and I'll do that 3 times. And at the end of the 3rd resonance of the bell, you can just open your eyes. But then as you open your eyes, you will just start to see the world around you, just the room that's around you, the people that are around you. So you'll start to get an idea of the 4th Satipatthana, the phenomena that's inside your mind. The phenomena that makes up or builds the space inside the stillness. So just take the time for 2 or 3 minutes after you open your eyes, just to let the 4th Satipatthana be there, the 4th foundation of mindfulness. And try and keep the stillness of mind there as well. And noticing the phenomena that builds inside the stillness. Hopefully you did get an idea of what that stillness feels like. Just the way that that it resounds. It's quite beautiful to be with, isn't it? Just when the mind is still and there's that contentment there. Because you have those, you know that the 5 hindrances are gone when your mind is sitting like that. I'll just maybe run through those hindrances just in case there's some people who I'm sure that most of you know about those anyway, but the 5 hindrances are really just desire and aversion. The first 4 are just 2 pairs. So the first 2 is just desire and aversion. Just as simple as that. So usually what disturbs our meditation is wanting to sort of race out to find a desire, or finding something that we need to do, or something that we're craving, or the opposite of that, which is just wanting to get rid of something. And these are the things that keep disturbing our mind all of the time, this desire where things are tempting us all the time to just move away from the stillness, or forcing us to be averse to whatever the situation is presenting for us. But you notice in the meditation when those desires and the aversion of those first 2 hindrances are quelled, are kind of damped down, just how much the mind moves towards contentment. And it's very beautiful, isn't it? It's very beautiful to be with your own mind when it's quite contented like that, when it's not moving and chasing things around all of the time. And then the third and the fourth hindrance is just restlessness is the third hindrance. So the body, this is all to do, the first two are about contentment, just how content your mind is. But the second two, the restlessness and the sloth and the torpor, so that's the third one's restlessness, the sloth and torpor, they're just again two opposites, is the third and the fourth hindrance. And that's really all about the energy that's in your body. And as you probably also know, that energy is mentioned a lot of times in the Buddhist teachings. It's very important to try and be able to sort of balance the energy in our body. And when that energy does get balanced, and that usually does happen when meditation is sort of working for us, there's a contentment that builds, but also the balance of our energy starts to even out. And that usually means that your back can sort of stay nice and straight and your head doesn't loll or move around. You kind of just sit very, very contentedly, very nicely. You know, it's no effort when the balance is right for your energy. So this is restlessness and sloth and torpor, the third and the fourth hindrance. And then, of course, the fifth hindrance is just really straightforward doubt. Doubting everything, doubting whether I'm doing it right, or is this right or is that wrong? What am I doing? All of these doubts that come in. And doubts are really, they're in a way quite a good hindrance in a way, because the Buddha always recommended that we keep our sceptical doubt on board a lot, you know, to make sure that what we're taking in, what we're learning about, what we're being conditioned with, if you like, to make sure that it is accurate, that it's not inaccurate, or just plain wrong. But you kind of can always know whether something is right or wrong by the way that you end up with stillness. Because really the whole of the Eightfold Path of practice really here is really all the whole path. The morality, the wisdom side of it, and also the meditation side of that Eightfold Path are all kind of pointing us towards being still, to know what the body is like to be still. And when the body is still, there's this possibility for a very, very deep reflection, a very deep understanding of just what it is that we're doing, what it is that we're involved with here in this universe, involved with here in our life. It kind of gives you the idea of being able to understand, who am I? Who is Dennis? Who are you? How did you get here? So this stillness becomes a very important thing to move towards for our meditation. And the thing is, with stillness, it actually allows for clarity in your mind, doesn't it? Once the mind becomes quite still, then it's like everything settles down, everything just all, any kind of debris or dust or dirt, or, I'm just imagining, when I'm talking about this, I'm imagining a big body of water. And once everything starts to settle, if there's no waves in there pushing the water around, or there's no fire underneath of it causing it to boil and bubble like a version, or the wind to sort of blow it like waves, that is the restless wind that's sort of blowing it round, or if it's just dull and sloth and torpor, where there's all of the slime and the mould that sort of grows over it, that allows you not to be able to sort of see clearly. So there's three of them there, and then the aversion itself, as the Buddha talked about, that as being like water having oil all over the surface. And you've got these beautiful, when it shines in the sun, you get these beautiful colours that can distract, and where you want to sort of go and look at them all the time, but it sort of stops you from being clear. It stops the clarity of your mind. And so when stillness is there, the mind just settles. It settles down, and when it settles down, it becomes very clear. You can start to see what it is that we're doing. So you do start to see, like what I talked about there, the mindfulness of mind, just understanding what your mind is. The stillness shows you that, because the mind itself is really has a matrix of stillness. The stillness is what is there containing the mind. It's still consciousness. Whenever I think about stillness, you can think about it in a few ways. You can think of it as emptiness. The Tibetans like to do that. The Mahayanans talk about it as emptiness. And then it can be pure consciousness. So just consciousness that's not moving, or stillness. Any one of those three terms is probably quite satisfactory to label that matrix of the mind. And that's wonderful to know, because once you know what that stillness is, then you've got a datum in your life. It's like, when you know what a datum is. A datum is something that allows you to always measure from. It gives you a baseline to measure from. And the stillness of mind it's a pure mind. So once you know what that is, and once you can cultivate that and amplify it in your own mind, so it's there all of the time, you can start to see and use that as a datum point, a datum for the way that our life moves and changes and moves around. It's a datum for the fourth Satipatthana, the fourth foundation of mindfulness, a datum for the phenomena of mind, for the creations of mind, for the creations that come about from the stillness. They arise out of the stillness, the creations, and then they move back into the stillness. You can start to see this very clearly. This is this clarity that the stillness brings. When you've got that datum of stillness there, you've got that clarity of mind to be able to sort of notice the way that the phenomena of mind creates. Sometimes those creations are good, sometimes it's wonderful. Life can be wonderful. I'll sort of get on to talk about this, the beauty of life, death and dying, which is the topic for tonight. But I'm talking here really about the unification of things. And this is really what the meditation is doing. We're kind of unifying the mind. We're allowing it all to settle. Just when we're still, we're allowing the mind just to settle. And once it settles, everything falls out. All of the creations sort of fall away. In fact, you can see this. Ajahn Brahma's probably one of the world's best teachers, really, with being able to show that with the way that he teaches the jhanas. Because you see that very clearly when you can know what a jhana is. A jhana is making the mind that still, that the whole world falls away. Your body falls away. You're no longer there, you've disappeared. The world's disappeared, the universe has disappeared. This is the power of stillness. This is the power of your mind. This is the matrix of the mind. It's what's there all of the time. It was there, hopefully, as you might have seen or got a glimpse of at least in the meditation just now. That stillness is always there, and we can cultivate that stillness. We can amplify it and make it strong, so that we've got it there as a datum, so that we can reflect as our life is moving. Because the phenomena of mind, when we talk about the phenomena of mind, we're really talking about the movement of mind. When you look at as some of you will probably know, some of you might know, it's a little bit more deeper into the Buddhist teachings, I was just talking about the 12 steps of dependent origination. But after ignorance and the sankharas, which is the second, the karma that we've got, which is the second factor in the 12 steps of a dependent origination. The third one is the flow of consciousness. The flow of consciousness starts. And when we've got stillness in mind, then we can notice that flow. You can start to see it. You can start to notice it in your mind. You can see it against the stillness. And this allows for great insight, because all of the time that we're doing this, as the mind is settling and becoming more still, we've got that clarity that's starting to build, to be able to see deeply into the nature of who we are, the nature of this universe that we're living in, just what it is. And more to the point too, we're looking into the nature of this dukkha, what dukkha is, the way that dukkha really is there, and what I'm just saying when I'm sort of coming onto this, because when I was talking before that life being good, and it can be good, can be exciting and wonderful and joyous and happy and all of the beautiful things that's there, but the Buddha told us that it's also dukkha. Because whenever we're looking into this stillness, or that, he recommended and encouraged us to see the three characteristics of all things. The three characteristics of all things are just basically this dukkha, the fact that everything is impermanent, and also not self. So there isn't really a self that you can find anywhere in these realms. So that when we're seeing or understanding the flow of consciousness, we're really seeing dukkha. It's dukkha writ large, if you like. It's dukkha that's sort of moving. It's the consciousness has been the consciousness and what's being presented into the consciousness is being grasped onto and causing it to sort of flow. So we've got this moving, and that's how we kind of notice our mind anyway, isn't it? We see, because the fourth Satipatthana is in fact the phenomena of mind, but we do see that as it's moving in its nature, isn't it? It's like our flow of consciousness. We can see that from one moment to the next, the way that our moods change, the way that our consciousness is moving and changing and all of the time. And it's moving because it's filled with dukkha. So really the way that I kind of see that too is really the consciousness itself. The moving consciousness is really this flow of dukkha. This dukkha, and the dukkha, as you know, is the first noble truth. First thing that the Buddha talked about, told us to make sure that we can try to understand the nature of this dukkha. So really the whole thing sort of fits into that. So the first noble truth is dukkha, and then the second noble truth is that dukkha begins, and the third noble truth is that dukkha ends. And we can see all that just in what we've talked about so far. We can see that the phenomena of mind begins. It has a beginning. You can see it coming out of the stillness, out of the still consciousness, the pure consciousness. But then you can also see that it ends there. That's where it finishes. It goes back into the still consciousness, into the spaciousness, the emptiness. So we kind of get to notice that we start to see those three characteristics that he talked about, the impermanence and the not-self nature, the no-self nature of it, and the way that it is empty. So we can start to see what we're playing with in this world. And this is really when you start to develop a little bit more, instead of being so passionate about everything, you start to see it more in the light of reality. Our view is starting to come more towards the reality of what it is that we're involved with here. And from the Buddhist point of view, is we're always sort of moving towards this middle way, towards this balance, the balance and the beauty of this balance. And that probably brings me a little bit more onto the topic for tonight, because the other thing that we notice with this clarity of mind when we're looking at it is that this mind itself is a continuum. It continues from one moment to the next, to the next, to the next. But we know too that whenever we're kind of watching this mind in the present moment, we know that, and as I've said here, and as Ajahn Brahm and all of the monks are telling us all the time, that this present moment is really the only place where reality is, in the present moment. But we notice that present moment kind of moves, doesn't it? It sort of moves and flows. It's just flowing consciousness. But is that real? Is that right? Is that reality? So as we're starting to settle into our meditation and sort of looking deeper and deeper into these things, we're starting to see really how that might work. How can all this be in the present moment? How can this life be in the present moment? So then we can start to use our wisdom and the knowledge that we're building up from the clarity of the meditation as we're sitting to meditate and building up the clarity of it all, to see deeply into this. And this is where, coming back to Ajahn Brahms, where I was talking before about him being such a wonderful teacher of jhanas, you know, he's able to sort of show us in our meditation how we can get to a point where we move into a jhana and the whole world disappears. The whole universe is gone. Our body is gone. And it's just the stillness that's there in the present moment is the only thing that's left over. So this is the first 4 jhanas, if you like, the first, second, third and fourth. Jhana takes care of that. This is the material form. So we see from that this material form is it is impermanent. It's not necessarily reality. The reality is something else. And then we can also look at the higher jhanas, the 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th jhana, which are all to do with the mental faculties that we've got, the mental, the mind, it's whatever's past the physical body that has just disappeared into the absorptions of the first 4 jhanas. But then we can start to look at the way that these higher jhanas too, including the mind itself, is impermanent as well. You can start to see that the more you become still, this stillness again, the way this stillness just, once you can know what it is and sort of hold the stillness there, everything just starts to disappear. The world, our body, and then as we're moving up to these higher jhanas, even our mind will disappear. But again, that's a little bit more difficult to understand and come to terms with, because you really need consciousness there to notice whether or not the mind is there or not. You need to be conscious of it. But that's really the wondrous nature of mindfulness. Again, just coming back to this mindfulness, because mindfulness can show us this. It can allow us to. It's a sort of a complicated. I won't go too much into the way that works tonight, because it's a little bit too complicated to talk about, really. But the mindfulness itself, though, has a way of even if we don't know, if we're kind of maybe watching onto ourselves and just say, for example, Dennis is finished. You know, I really won't know that Dennis is finished until after the momentum of that experience has gone, is finished. But then I might know, or something happened there, but then you can call on mindfulness. And mindfulness actually works through the entanglement that you have with your body. But you can recall on the mindfulness to go back over and look and notice and see what happened. Same in the material forms too, because in the material jhanas it's not really possible to think. There's no thinking anymore. But at least the mind is there though, the mind is there, but you can't really reflect on what happened until after the event. So this is really the power of meditation though, the power of being able to learn how to meditate, because you can and be somewhat knowledgeable of the stillness, because once that stillness is there for you, this clarity starts to come. You can start to see all these things that the Buddha talked about. And if you want to go and have a look at the Anapanasati Sutta that the Buddha spoke about in the suttas, you will see that Anapanasati Sutta, this simple thing of being able to feel into your body, to be able to feel into that sort of is the beginning of this whole process of being able to really see deeply and understand deeply what happens for us in this life and in this world and just what this universe is. Really quite a wondrous, it's a wondrous thing to be with. But when you're kind of working with that and you're noticing all that, you notice that we get to be the way that we are because we're conditioned. We are conditioned creatures, conditioned people. What that means is that we're kind of, we take on board things that we don't really even know that we've taken on board. Like, for instance, you could ask yourself, how do you know what you know? We just kind of take it as given, don't we? I'm Dennis and I'm a man and I think this way and I think that and I vote this way, I do that way, I think of that way. I don't like this, I like that. How does all that come into your being? And that's all from the realm of conditioning. When you start to look at all of this, we notice just how much we are conditioned. We're habitually conditioned into this world, habitually conditioned into our lives. I often kind of think about this with, when you're a new baby just born, and you come into your home with your parents, and your parents are usually pretty happy to have you. And they start, you start learning from them straight away, because as a baby you're pretty helpless, you're really relying on your parents, and your parents will provide everything you need, and you're kind of learning from them. You're starting to pick up the conditioning that they've kind of, they're showing you and giving you. And you can, the other way this works, conditioning is always a two-way process too, because the baby is conditioning the parents as well. It doesn't take long for a baby to know how to get what it wants from its parents. But then as we move on from there into childhood and then to school and to into maybe university or other, further along, all the time. It's the government itself, our culture. It's all providing us with our conditioning. It's all coming in, but it comes in without us even knowing. Some, as you know, I kind of do hypnosis as a sideline, really, a sideline business. It's always sort of been for me. Well, not so much a business, it's really a joy to do it, actually, helping people with hypnosis. But in learning about hypnosis, you see the power of this conditioning happening very clearly. You see that people, we are all very vulnerable. We can all, you can put suggestions into people's minds that, you see it happening now with social media. You listen often enough to social media, and then all of a sudden you become inculcated with what you're being told. So then what happens then, this information comes into us and we kind of just don't really question where it came from or how it got there. We just believe this is the way, that person's bad, this person's good, this government's good, that's bad. All of these views and opinions that we might have. But we tend to, just bring up the idea of those. I think the right word to use for that would be to confabulate. We confabulate these ideas into what we think is true, what we think is real. And so that conditioning, anyway, I just hope I've kind of shown you that this conditioning is very deep. It's there for us all. And it works in this continuum. There's this it continues in the mind stream, all of this conditioning. And it goes from life to life too. I certainly see that in the hypnosis that I do, where I have people that come along to talk about past lives or traumas that might come out of past lives that we try and work with. So it's not just one life, but really we've been involved in all of this over many, many lifetimes. And if you look at some of the work that's around, like Professor Ian Stevenson, he's died now, but at Penn State University, he's looked at thousands upon thousands of past lives. Children in the main, he used to study. But for me anyway, past lives are, they're kind of a real phenomena. I see people all the time that have had, trouble in their past lives that come to haunt them in this life. So, but I do know that there can be a lot of scepticism about that. People might believe that or not believe it, but once you kind of start to get the clarity going there, you start to see that this life is a continuum. This mind stream that we've got is continuing on, not only through this life, but when we die. So the idea then is that when we die, or when death comes for us, it's very good for us, very wise for us to be awake to it, to really know what's happening to us when we die. Because and as the Buddha said too, death is really, it's an ideal time to notice all of this and an ideal time to actually become enlightened if you've got the awareness and the motivation to sort of do that. Unfortunately for a lot of us, we're kind of a bit fearful of death and none of us look forward to it, I suppose. But nonetheless, we've all had a lot of experience with it. And you can find ways of becoming more aware of this process as you're getting older. And certainly for me, sort of moving on now towards this side of life, you kind of want to think about that a little bit more and maybe make some preparations and practice to be mindful, so that that I can be kind of aware of what's happening when the body starts to drop away. In the Mahayana tradition, they're kind of very big in this kind of thing because they have what they call the 6 bardos, and they very often sort of help each other in being able to help people through those processes, so that if you are going to be reborn, you can maybe get a favourable rebirth, but also, to move into that process and through that process and maybe even become enlightened. And I think that's very possible for all of us, to be enlightened, to see what the Buddha saw, to know what the Buddha saw, and then to use that all to good effect. So, being awake at our death is really quite beneficial, very beneficial thing to do, just to be awake and aware with it. I've just recently been going over to I'm speaking a little bit about the Mahayana tradition because I've been going over to the Hayagriva temple over the this last year really, just being with them because they're starting up a hospice service and they're also training people to sort of be with people that are dying. So I've been just learning a little bit from them, just the various things that they kind of practice and do. And just hearing a few of the Dalai Lama's meditations and the way that he sees things and the way that he practices to be ready and aware for when the body starts to disintegrate, because that will happen, you know. And sometimes that happens. I mean, I've had experience with this with myself. Sometimes that dissolvement or the deterioration of the body can even start happening weeks before you die. Even the idea that your mind starts to, or you start to sort of move towards, well, it's really moving towards those absorptions, moving towards what it's like when to feel when there isn't a body there, when you haven't got a body anymore. And they talk in the Mahayana tradition. They talk about that with the elements. You know, there's earth, water, fire, air, and space. Those 5 elements that they've used these teachings for, well, a couple of thousand years, I suppose. And but just noticing the first thing to go is the earth element. So, you know, the way that you kind of feel sometimes being submerged or suppressed, pressed down, maybe uncomfortable, moving around all of the time, that sort of thing, because you don't really know what's happening to you. But if you can get a bit of practice and a little bit of help beforehand, it's much easier to go into a situation like that where you know what's happening with you, where you're not just going to be sort of caught up into fear and just not wanting to be there. Because all of these processes, you know, just as Ajahn Brahm will say, when you're moving into these absorptions, they're quite lovely. It's just like the meditation, you know, when I'm talking about the rapture and the beauty of it all, you can really come to terms with all that and sense it, to really celebrate that rapture and the joy that comes from the contentment and the stillness that's there. Because even in this process of death, when your consciousness is presenting usually in 3 ways, it does this all through our life. So we can practice with this all through our lives. You know, we all have unconscious times. We all have subconscious times. But we all have wakeful times too, or conscious. We're conscious of what's happening in our lives. But that subconscious dreamy state that we can get into too, we can start to sort of understand that and just start to notice some of the things that are going on in that subconscious, especially when you're dreaming, or especially, you know, I find it best to sort of look at that too when you're coming awake in the morning. You know, usually, you know, maybe around about 4 o'clock or so, usually my mind starts coming up from unconscious, you know, where I'm not sort of aware of anything. But then I can sort of come up and sort of notice that there's this subconscious time that's happening before you awaken. And it's just sometimes interesting to notice what's going on there, because it's usually always reflective of what's happening in your life. You know, your sleep and your dreams are, in a way, very helpful for you, because and especially the unconscious too, that's very helpful. Because it's allowing your body to rest, allowing your body to heal itself and to fix things up a bit here, sort of straighten things out. Allows you to drop some things off and sort of keep some things in. So working with all of that, these 3, what I call the 3 guises of consciousness: unconscious, subconscious and wakefulness. All of those are really good to understand and know about a bit, so that because the same thing happens in your death. You know, you hear that often enough, really, just where there's very usual that a mind can, even when the body drops away, the mind still operates. The mind is still there, it's still functioning, and it can create all sorts of, it can conjure up your the senses as they are. It's always very possible to have a mind-made body. We've had lots of stories, like Ajahn Brahm tells the story of there's a person here in Perth that was meditating one time, and he went into a very deep absorption state, and his wife thought that he'd died. And his wife called the ambulance, of course, and he's bundled into the back of the ambulance, and he even had the pedals on him and everything like that. And then after a certain time, when the momentum of the absorption sort of moved away, he kind of just woke up and said, well, he's in hospital. What am I doing here? But we're lucky in that situation. I think the doctor kind of realised that there was something else happening than him just dying, because nothing really worked. And but he could tell that his body was still sort of operating. It was still, even though he wasn't breathing or anything like that, his body was still operating. But it's almost like as if the mind takes over. In fact, there's another story like that in the suttas too. I've only really been told, I need to really go and read this just to make doubly sure that I'm sort of saying what it is. But Ajahn Brahm has told me that this is accurate, that there was a guy who went into a similar, in the Buddhist time this is, he went into a similar absorption state, and the villagers come by and saw him there, and they sort of laid him out. They just figured he was dead, but he was really just deep into meditation. They actually, in the suttas it said that they actually built a pyre for him and burnt him, burnt his body. And they just went on, normally, or however you would normally work with a situation like that. But the next morning in the arms round, he was back in the queue, back in the lineup. So that's a story from the suttas. So it just shows you really the power and what happens with these mind-made situations, because this world itself that we're living with here, it is really a mind-made world, a mind-made universe. So understanding our mind and understanding the impermanent nature of all of this material form and the dukkha that's in it and the non-self nature of it is very important to understand. So I think I might leave my comments there and just see if there's any questions at all from the floor or from the internet. And I thank you all for your patient listening. But is there any questions? Yes. Yes, is that Eddie, is it? You'll have to I'm really very blind now. I can't see a thing much. But you're all very blurry out there for me, I'm afraid. I have a hard job just seeing my watch. Sorry, Eddie. Yeah, go ahead, Eddie.
Yeah. Dennis, thanks for the deep talk, wonderful deep talk. I do fully understand what you say. Okay? You mentioned about the 4 foundations of mindfulness.
Yeah.
Yeah. To me, of all the Buddha's teaching, I went round and round. It was the 4 foundations of mindfulness, that gave me the direct tool, to help me to deal with my problems, to overcome my problem.
Yeah.
I'm sure you understand the thing. Yeah. Can I just share a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah. You see, this is the Eightfold Path. You have the other things. It doesn't make much sense to me. Yeah. But this gives me, So whenever I have problem, okay, whenever this problem comes with like disturbing feeling, disturbing emotion, I quickly I know to calm down now, and I reflect on the 4 foundations. First, the body. Without saying everything, is within this certain long body. I look at my body, okay, yeah.
Mm.
And then I look into my feeling, this emotion. Why is it coming? Oh, there's this phenomena. Something happened, and my mind is harping on it. No. You understand? I'm not happy with this thing, and it's fighting, That's why this negative feeling comes to me. Knowing this, I'm in control. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in control of my situation. I don't panic really. So what I use the Buddha's tools, things like impermanence, no self-suffering, patience, tolerance, understanding, and then the lojong, you put in some positive thoughts. There's a lot of tools. It takes a long time. And then you find impermanence. It slowly becomes less. Small problems go off quickly. You don't notice that?
Yeah, well, that's right.
Bigger ones take a longer time, but it still goes off. So this is for me, is the direct tool from the Buddha. I was going round and round and round. Till this comes out, I found it. And that stays with that's what I'm sharing.
Where you can anchor everything into your body.
Yeah, that's why I use my mind. If the mind is for under causes, what's the cause? I'm under control. I don't need the medication. But sometimes for beginners or whatnot, if you find you have a problem, you need medication, you have to take it. And then after a while, when you feel better, this thing, you stop it, tell the doctor you don't want it anymore. And then you come back with the weekend.
Very, very good, Eddie. Thank you for that.
I'm just sharing my experience for what you were for. It's very powerful to me, and it helped me a lot.
It's good. Is there any questions there, Conrad? That's good. That's. And could you just read it? Would you mind just coming to? Yeah, but have you got a microphone there? Oh, I'm sorry, I can't see that. Maybe just talk a bit closer. We're just changing microphones, just so that you can hear the questions.
Would you agree that the mind and the body, Dhammaloka, is inseparable? You must have both of them to work together. Would you agree that?
I think so. Yeah, mind and it's always good to have your mind and body working together. And in fact, I think that's really the essence of what we're talking about here with the four Satipatthanas, because the Buddha is very clearly telling us that the feelings that are inside the body are what is going to direct us towards our mind and what the mind is, certainly the stillness of mind, but then also the phenomena of mind, what it is that makes up a mind. So, I'd say that they are inseparable. But in the end though, the body itself, though, does unify into the mind. So the body and the world, this whole world, does it like it's it may be like there's sort of looks like they're separate things, but as this practice works on, they kind of unify, and the mind subsumes and holds all your body and and the world that we're living in. It holds all that inside it, and it's all inside the present moment. It gets quite difficult to think about at one level like that. That's really why you need to have the clarity of mind to make sure that that's all, working well for you. But I don't think that's a bad concept you're talking about there. The working with your body and mind together. That's certainly always very healthy.
It's not working together. Are they inseparable? You cannot have the mind without the body. You cannot have the body without the mind. Would that be?
No, I don't think that's quite right. There's certainly a lot of, in Buddhist cosmology, there is a lot of, the Buddha used to talk about mind-made creatures, creatures without it. In fact, the Buddha used to talk with people that... Well, now that we're here, now that we're here, we've got a body and we've got to acknowledge the body. If we don't acknowledge the body, you don't get very far. It can. Yes, it can, yeah. No, the mind can exist by itself, and it will do when you die.
So when the body dies, when the mind goes to
Yeah, well, the mind is there. It's just there in the present moment.
yeah, it's not in our body, the mind can be anywhere. It can be
Well,
whole Earth population in box there. Their mind box. The mind doesn't have space or anything.
No, that's certainly right. It's immeasurable, really. You can't measure.
Where does it go when we die?
Well, when we die, I think the best way of sort of seeing that is it sort of just disappears back into the still mind itself, with all of its karmic attachment, with all of the sankharas that have been built. They're ready to build a new mind. But all of that just goes back into the stillness, which is really as you were saying, it is like a place that's immeasurable. It's beyond measurement. There's no time and there's no space where that is. It's very difficult to sort of talk about like this, but that's certainly the way it is. It's the way that physics sees it too.
So my next question is the mind very similar to the consciousness?
Yeah, well, I would say it's one and the same.
So consciousness is in our body, right?
Yes.
So without the body, the consciousness won't be there.
No, consciousness. Well, it depends what you're defining now as consciousness. But consciousness is like the dukkha. It's consciousness is there. It's building. Consciousness is built in this space beyond measurement.
Consciousness is part of the mind.
It basically is the mind.
We have our five khandhas, and the mind is nominal of five khandhas. That's what I thought. Without the consciousness, there won't be any mind.
I think that's what you're saying there is right. Without consciousness, there's no mind, but without mind, there's no consciousness. So I'm just really saying that consciousness and mind are really one and the same.
So would you agree that we must have Dhammaloka, body and mind, otherwise we cannot have just one?
No, your mind can exist without your body.
Whose mind is that?
Well, it's your mind stream. It's a stream of consciousness that you're holding on to, that we all hold on to.
No, when our body dead already, so where, there won't be any mind. You don't have any consciousness, and have your mind.
No, well, it's the mind is certainly there when your body dies.
But you lost the consciousness.
Unless you're enlightened.
Your heart stops, you don't have any feeling, you cannot hear, you cannot see, you cannot taste, you cannot smell, you don't have any feeling of touch.
Yeah. But the still consciousness is still there. Certainly all those consciousnesses from your sense doors, they all disappear. The eye consciousness, the ear and the nose and the smelling and the tasting and tactile consciousness, they disappear, but your mind is still there. The mind, the consciousness of stillness. Anyway, we'll leave it like, maybe we can talk about this afterwards if you like. Yeah.
We've got two questions here, Dennis.
Yep.
Who will give you on this microphone?
I don't know, it might be this one.
What are the characteristics of the first jhana?
Well, in the first jhana, you're certainly your mind will the mind unifies just into just the stillness itself. So everything just stops. But then there's, as the jhana continues on, it kind of there's deeper levels of stopping just as you go on. But in the first jhana, there might be a little bit of wobble still there. There might be a little bit of the sense doors still around in there. But the basic thing is that your whole of the sense of yourself has disappeared, and you don't think. But in the first jhana, there may be a little bit of sort of in and out of that. It's a little bit wobbly. But then in the second, third, and the fourth jhana, it kind of gradually gets more pure, until there's just the mind itself standing forth. So.
Next question. Dear Dennis, I feel very lonely and left out in life because my interests are different from those of my friends. I'm not good at getting along with my friends at university. Can you please advise?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people in the world that are like that, actually, that are quite lonely and feel quite alienated. Just what to do in a situation like that is... well, I think the best... Certainly the first thing that probably should... What's this person's name, is it? Okay, well, whoever you are, probably the first thing that would be really good to do would be to start doing things that really build yourself up. So in other words, and the best way to do that too, incidentally, is really to help others. So you might want to find, say, a way of doing some helping work. It might be work at a hospital, or it might be work at a gardening centre, or maybe even the person next door or down the road who hasn't got the wherewithal or the ability to be able to sort of do things like maybe they're shopping or they're gardening. But to go out and help people, to find a way to volunteer, to do things like that, always makes you feel less alienated, less vulnerable, because you're starting to sort of work your way into the world. Now that takes a bit of effort to do that, and it's not so easy to just to do that without sort of a fair bit of effort and mindfulness too on your part to actually do it, because the tendency is just it doesn't all matter, nobody cares about me anyway, or nobody. But the thing is though that you can care about others, and when you're doing that, what that does for you, it actually helps yourself. It actually builds up your own self-esteem. It builds up your own zest for life, and your ability to help, and the ability to give service to others. And that's really the way that you do make yourself meaningful in the world. And not only that, then you'll start getting feedback from people that kind of is reflecting the goodness that you're allowing yourself to do for others. You'll start getting that reflection back, and it's always very nice. I mean, you're not doing the work though to necessarily just get compliments and praise, but it helps. That certainly helps when that starts to happen, because the truth is that sometimes you'll do this work and you might not get the compliments and praise, but you've got to just sort of push on and do it, because you'll find that the more that you do this service and the way that you work for others in the world, you will start to feel much better about yourself. So I don't know if that completely answers it. It was a pretty sad question, that really. Can you just read it again, please, Conrad? Is it?
Dear Dennis, I feel very lonely and left out in life because my interests are different from those of my friends. I'm not good at getting along with my friends at my university. Can you please advise?
Yeah, interests are different. It'd be probably good to know just how, in what way they are different or why. But there surely must be some people around, though, that you will find that has some interests the same as yourself. Even this path of Buddhism is not really, it's not really everybody's cup of tea, to start practicing in the way that we do as Buddhists. In fact, the Buddha said that, his teachings really are for those with just a little dust in their eyes, so we kind of know that probably most people in the world won't be really interested to absorb into stillness. You only really see how beneficial and the reason why you should do it, though, once you start to fully appreciate what it is that we're involved in. As long as we're kind of just lost in samsara, lost in this world of never-ending beginningless beginnings and never-ending ends, it's once you realise that we are on this continuum and you've got this kind of stream of consciousness that runs through, it's only that really makes you want to wake yourself up to see what the Buddha was pointing to. Because, after all, when you think of the Buddha, he really came from he's probably life, I think it was pretty good in his early years, but when he left his palace and left all his opulence and probably the hedonistic life that he was maybe living there, and then sort of moved into what he saw as he would try out as the opposite, the aestheticism and that. And then he realised that these extremes of living and the way that we kind of seem to jump from these extremes one to the other, he realised that the middle way, the present moment, was where he should put his effort and energy. But you really only do that once you kind of realise what dukkha is. That's why I think the Buddha was so brave in putting dukkha as the first noble truth, because it is, nobody really wants to acknowledge dukkha. You might say, oh, well, yeah, sure, the world's dukkha, but I have a good time. I'm all right. But the world can never be made perfect. That's just the way that it is. So that's probably another thing that our friend should contemplate as well. But I'm sure that if he does open himself up a little bit more to just to being with others and helping others, that'll go a long way to making him feel better about himself. Yes. Yeah, you can ask one more.
What's the best way to cope with anxiety? I'm new here, by the way.
The best way to cope with anxiety? Well, I think the best way, if you can, the person's here?
The comment that I'm new here, by the way.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but he's new on the internet. Well, the best way to cope with anxiety is to understand it, really, because anxiety is usually all about worries about the future. Worries about what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day or next year, whenever it is. There's usually these mental illnesses like this, and probably I don't want to sort of make it sound that harsh, but because it might not necessarily be a full-blown sort of mental illness, but usually these anxieties and depressions, they're usually on a spectrum. Depressions are usually worries about what happened in the past, what I've done or what I should have done and all of that sort of thing. Anxieties are usually more about worries about the future and what might happen and how am I going to be able to sort of fix this or do that, all of those kinds of anxieties. Now, the best way to fix them, really both of those ways, is to really start to understand them, and the best way to do that is to if you can, to bring in a bit of meditation and make your mind still. So in other words, you'll probably notice that when for this gentleman or lady that's asking the question, you'll probably find that if you look into your mind that you're your mind is jumping around a lot. It's probably moving around a lot. Worried here, worried there, disappointed with this, disappointed with that. So the best thing is then once you start to see that, once you notice that in your mind, then just make a resolution that you're going to sit and just try and practice to make your mind still. And this is where meditation really comes in to help. Meditation can help to put the right perspective on all of that. Yeah, so I think that's what I would say to that. Thanks, Conrad. Any more questions? We call it a night? Or Eddie's got one more?
Dennis,
Yes.
very interesting talk about the mind. Yeah, I don't know whether you're aware of this. I got this from Tibetan textbooks. It says our problem and our well-being and problem being 80% of it comes from our mind. 80%. The other 20% is from karma, from the food we eat, from the weather, and spiritual disturbance. It makes sense, isn't it?
Yeah. And really all of that's coming from the mind, isn't it?
They didn't put in the spiritual disturbance.
Yeah.
This is from mind, 30% from our karma, the weather affecting us, and the food we eat.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting, Eddie. But again, all of that is 100% from the mind, really, isn't it? Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, we'll call it quits for the night. And thank you very much all for your patient listening. And we'll just pay respects to the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha. And thank you for listening.